come on, let's just give everybody, Terry, because I wanted to acknowledge, I didn't know that John was going to acknowledge him, but give him a round of applause again, too. All the hard work, I mean, just a lot of emails between Terry and I, phone calls, travel plans, all kinds of stuff. It takes a lot of work to put on any kind of meeting like this, so, and everything is just beautiful. I mean, I can't imagine being in a better meeting room. I'm going to turn this one off, because I don't need two microphones, do I? So, can you all hear me okay on this one on my neck? Okay, I'm going to move this out of the way. We'll do that later. So, I think everything that you guys are doing is fantastic, and again, what Terry's doing, what the Gerards have done from the get-go, and no more retirement, right? You're done with the retirement. We're going to not let him retire anymore. So, I asked him, what is retirement like? Because I don't know yet, but I'm anxious to find out one of these days, right? So I'm Kathy Snow. I live in San Antonio, Texas. That's where we're from. When the kids were little, we moved to Colorado for, Colorado, we're neighbors, But we lived up in the mountains, not in the plains. Everybody thinks that Colorado, the whole state is mountainous. And eastern part of Colorado is like Kansas, right? I mean, it's sort of the same thing. Dorothy and, all flat and everything. So we lived up in the mountains, and then we moved back to San Antonio about 3 years ago. Our moms and dads were getting older. We were making a lot of trips, 17-hour trips back to be with our moms. There were better job opportunities because we live in this little bitty town up in the mountains where there are not very many jobs because everybody commutes down to Colorado Springs. Anyway, so now we're back in Texas. The joke when we lived in Colorado, if any of you guys go and visit there or ski or whatever, we're not skiers, but the joke when we lived at 9,000 feet elevation was we had 3 seasons, July, August, and winter. And so we moved back to Texas, where we're natives. We realized that there are 3 seasons there too. It's winter and summer and about 2 days of spring. That's about it. Except it's been like this here. Where is spring when we need it, right? I'm flying out tonight back home, but I heard on the radio this morning that a big front's coming in, and the high tomorrow is going to be 32. So, darn Easter egg hunts in the cold, right? Anyway, it is a privilege and an honor to be here with you all. I'm going to talk about some sort of new ways of thinking in a second, but I'm going to do 15 seconds of shameless self-promotion. So in your packet, don't worry about looking at them now, because then you won't be looking up here. But I sent a few handouts. I want you to go to our website, disabilityisnatural.com, and there's over 200 articles there that I'm trying not to see too many so that Terry doesn't have to cut down too many trees to make copies. But you can go on my website, and there's, again, probably close to 300 articles. It's over 200 about new ways of thinking and about new ways of doing stuff within the disability arena. And so you're welcome to download those and make copies and share them with other people, or you can contact me if you see something that you want different things to do with them. You can go to the contact us forms, and I'll be there. I also have some flyers up here about our website. You're welcome to get one of those. And I have a few books. This is the 3rd edition of my first book, Disability is Natural, Revolutionary Common Sense for Raising Successful Children with Disabilities. And this is from birth to young adulthood. And so most of you might not be interested in this because unless you have a younger child. But a lot of people said, oh, Kathy, I'll never read a big book like that. Nobody wants to read anymore, right? And so I said, okay, fine. You don't want to read a big book? Then I'll write a little book. So there's no excuses. So I brought a few with me. I take checks, credit cards, debit cards, take it out of your hide. This is $10. It's called Apple Bites, Common Sense Disability Strategies for Everyone. So it has one idea per page, just one, big print. Just look at the pictures. You don't even have to read it. Just look at the graphics. So if anybody's interested, and this is for everybody. This is for parents. This is for people with disabilities themselves. This is for staff people. And I'll also have a little email newsletter that you can sign up for. I don't inundate you with stuff. I try to give it out once a month, but I'm usually like 2 months behind. So you know that I'm not going to flood your email. And if you sign up for it and you don't like it, just unsubscribe. And I think that's about all for now. Well, as John said, Mark and I will be married coming up on 38 years. So, that's a good thing to do. Finally we got to the point where we've been married to each other longer than we have not been married to each other. And that's a real milestone in somebody's life. And we have 2 kids, Emily and Benjamin. And Benjamin's how I got into this, and I'll tell you about him as we go along a little bit. So I'm going to share with you some revolutionary common sense and some new ways of thinking. And I think as we go along, you'll see that most of it is common sense. When John said that I don't sugarcoat stuff. I think that we kind of lost our common sense about disability issues, I don't know, 2,000 or 3,000 years ago. Okay, I don't think we've ever had really the right idea that we can get to that point. And it's some new ways of thinking. And I like this quote from William James, who is a great American philosopher and psychologist. So the greatest discovery of my generation is that human beings can alter their lives by altering their attitudes of mind. And so really this is all about our attitudes and then what happens after that. Oh, and I want to ask you guys, if you have questions, I want you to save them till the end this morning. But write them down, because you'll have a question and then you're going to forget it. Because then I'll think of something else and then you'll have another question and you'll forget that one. So I want to hear your questions. I'm going to try to keep everything condensed so that we have some time for some Q&A. I'm going to share with you what I hope are some sort of eye-opening, sort of aha moments that the light bulb goes off. And I'm not smart enough to have figured most of this out myself. I am the beneficiary of the wisdom and the expertise of the true experts in this field. And a lot of parents, we think that we're the experts. And if you're a professional, you think that you're the expert. But what I realize is that the true experts are people with disabilities themselves. I can never know what it's like to have a developmental disability. I can only know what it's like to be the parent of a child with a disability, now a young adult. And so I started learning from them when my son was very young, that I was in a leadership development training program called Partners in Policy Making, which you all have one here. It started in Minnesota, and then it's done at the state level, usually from the Developmental Disabilities Council. And Kansas had a program for years, and then they don't have it anymore. I wish that they would put it back. But at the time, I was in the program, and it's leadership training for adults with developmental disabilities and for parents of children. So those two groups are in the same room together, which doesn't happen very often. And so I thought I was this great advocate when my son was 3, because I was hanging out with other parents, right, of other kids with disabilities. That's what we do. And got to know the adults with disabilities in my class, and it's like, wow, that was an eye-opening, life-changing experience. We had great speakers. I mean, it's like 168 hours of training or something over like 8 months, like 1 week in a month. And I started learning from the adults way back then, and I realized, you don't know what you don't know. And I realized, wow, I don't know very much, as much as I thought I was this good advocate, and I was in parent support groups and all that kind of stuff. And when I got to know the adults with disabilities, started changing my life, and of course changed our son's life. And on our website, besides the articles and the books and stuff, we have a little website store. And so I started creating products that include new ways of thinking about disability, and they're all from real life experiences. And so we print them on posters. We have a little cottage industry in my, I call it my office, but it's really our den. So I have printers, and we make badges and note cards and bookmarks and posters and stuff. And so I started learning from these adults all those years ago, like back in 1990, and I was hoping, and I'm sure those of you that have been doing this for a while, we have seen improvements, but we haven't seen the level of improvement that I thought that we would see, because still for too many people with disabilities, things are not changing as much as I thought they would have changed over this period of time. But what the adults were telling me, and so funny, I said, okay, I have to put that on a poster. Because what they were telling me in 1990, I still hear similar stories today. And so I had to condense it to the, I'll fit on the poster. But what these experts told me was, and I'm again paraphrasing, but they'd say, your words, it means all of ours, your words, attitudes, and actions impact my life more than my disability. So if you take nothing away from this, you take that away. It's never, ever, ever about the person's diagnosis. It's always about us and what we do. And I mean us collectively, us as parents, us as professionals, providers, educators, therapists, physicians, general society, the public, whatever. And I realized a long time ago that our words and our attitudes are our choice. And we're not born with words, we're not born with attitudes. Although some of your parents might have thought you were born with an attitude, might have that kid's got an attitude. But we learn those things. And of course they're intertwined, because your words and your attitudes reflect each other. But those are the things that drive our actions. Okay? Our words and our attitudes, we choose those, but they drive our actions. So for example, we just look at it from a political standpoint, that if you use conservative words and have conservative attitudes, you're probably going to vote for conservative candidates. But at the same time, if you use progressive or whatever, so you all see how that makes sense. If you think about public schools, and I know that a lot of you that are here as parents, or your children are adults now, but if you think about whether or not your child with a disability attended a public school, where all the kids with disabilities were included in general ed classrooms. Whether or not they were or not is not about children with disabilities, it's about the attitude of the administrator. Because my children in 1990 were attending a school that was inclusive back in the late 80s. And when you know, that's when we moved from Texas to Colorado, we found the school, it's like, yeah, I want men to be included. And so they were already, you know, it was an inclusive school. There wasn't a special ed room. And it wasn't about, I mean, there were kids with Down syndrome and autism and, you know, emotional behavior diagnoses and, you know, cerebral palsy like my son. So it wasn't about their diagnoses, it was about the attitude of the principal. The principal said, we're going to have an inclusive school. We're going to make sure that all kids are in general ed classrooms. You know, well, back then in 1990, I thought, well, boy, if this little school is doing this, then probably all these other schools are going to start doing it. No, that hasn't happened. And so, like, I just get really frustrated. It's like, well, we know that this stuff can be done. We know that people are doing it. So why aren't more people doing it? So it's about the attitude of the administrator that leads to his or her actions, whether or not it's an inclusive school or not. So I hope that we realize that if we in this room decide to start having new words and new attitudes, that leads to new actions, that we can create new lives for people with disabilities in our lives. And for those not yet born. And one thing, I don't have this on a slide, but I just want you all to think about that what we do today in the lives of people with disabilities will impact children with disabilities that are not yet born. So that what we as parents are having to deal with are some of what parents before us, the generations before us did, and a lot of the stuff they did was really, really good, and some of it could have been better, and that's not a criticism. Everybody in this room has done the best they knew to do at that moment in time. But there are children who are not yet born that what we're doing today, what foundation we're laying, what kind of legacy we're leaving is going to impact them. So my hope and my goal, and I'd like to see it in my lifetime, is that all people with disabilities live what I consider a real life in the real world. And my definition of that is very, very simple. It's this: what would the person be doing if he or she didn't have a disability? Now, right away, some people start thinking, oh, if they didn't have a disability, the person would be walking, or talking, or feeding themselves, or having appropriate behavior, or having the pincher grasp, or writing their name, or you know, that kind of functional skills. And that gets us in the whole quality of life issue, but that's not what I'm talking about. It was people with disabilities, again, when my son was 3, who helped me realize that you don't have to walk to have a good life, but you might need a power wheelchair. You don't have to talk to have a good life, but you might need a communication device. You don't have to do all those functional things to have a good life. And again, that gets us in this whole quality of life, because we talk about quality of life a lot in this field. And the quality of life, unfortunately, that we are accustomed to is the quality of life that's based on the medical model. And the medical model is something you're all familiar with. The medical model is, I've got a sore throat, I've got a broken arm. Whenever I go to the doctor and I say, doctor, I want you to fix it, right? I've got a problem, I want you to fix it. Well, that's the model that has always been used about people with disabilities. It's the model that's used in early intervention services for, you know, birth to 3. So therapists and other people come in the house and say, let's look at what this kid's not doing and try to make right goals for them to get them to do that. It's a model that we use in special education. It's a model we use in adult services too many times, that let's look at all these person's problems or what they're not doing, and we're going to write goals so that they will do that. Okay? Well, we still have people with disabilities, right? We keep doing this kind of stuff, but is that making the disability go away, or is that, you know? So again, what is quality of life? I want you to think about quality of life after today. I hope you'll embrace a new way of thinking about quality of life. And it's this. I want you to fast forward to your deathbed. You're going to be dead in 24 hours. You're an older person, you've had a stroke or a car accident, you're a young person, you've had a car accident, whatever. Your organs are shutting down. You are dying. There is no saving you. In the last 24 hours of your life, is anybody in this room going to be laying there thinking to themselves, you're looking back over your life, oh, I'm so glad I was able to talk. I'm so glad I could walk. I'm so glad I had the pincer grasp. I'm so glad I had appropriate behavior. I'm so glad I could read at grade level. Are you going to be thinking about any of those kinds of things on your deathbed? You're looking back over your life? What are you going to be thinking about as you look back over your life? What? I'm going to put it in 2 words: relationships and experiences. Who did you love? Who loved you? Your wonderful neighbors, you know, that were always there watching out for you, or your co-workers, or your extended family and all the family reunions you had every year, or that vacation you and your family saved up for to go to Hawaii, or you know, whatever your favorite thing was. That's what you're going to be looking back over. So when I want people with disabilities to live real lives, that's what I'm talking about. That they have the same opportunities for those ordinary, ordinary but precious relationships and experiences that people without disabilities take for granted. We just take them for granted. But those don't happen to people with disabilities because we continue to adhere to conventional wisdom. And conventional wisdom still says that disability is a problem. And anytime we see something as a problem, we think we have to fix it. Okay? So at one time, and some of you have been in this field a long time, you know, at one time the solution to the problem of people with disabilities was put people in institutions. That was seen as a solution. Furthermore, while they're in the institution, let's sterilize them so they can't make any more of their own kind. We haven't, I mean, that was just in the 1960s, okay, when we started the deinstitutionalization movement to get people out of institutions, okay? And that was, you know, a watershed moment, and that was a great thing. Let's get people out of these, you know, hellholes of human misery that we call state-run institutions. But all we did was change the location of where people got services, because you all know the term community-based services, right? Community-based services just means they're not institution-based, because at the time the only services available to kids and adults with disabilities were in the institution. So my son had been born way back then, and I said, well, my son needs some help. They say, fine, put him in the institution. I said, well, I don't want to do that. Well, then too bad, okay? So with the advent of lawsuits and everything that said we've got to get people out of institutions, got to get them in the community, that was the birth of community-based services. So what we've done is we've just sort of changed the location. We didn't really change our attitude. So now we have all kinds of programs and services and treatments and interventions, but we're still seeing disability as a problem. So we didn't, that attitudinal shift has still not changed. So instead, because of that way of thinking, instead of people with disabilities living in real life in the real world, people with disabilities end up in what I call disability world. And disability world is a small place and it's a dark place. And it's a world of special, and I put special in quotes because we don't really mean special at all. It becomes a world of services, and for too many people, it becomes a lifelong world of segregation. And this is what I realized when Bates was little. I didn't call it disability world at the time, but I just realized that, you know, everybody else goes in that main road to the real life and the real world. But when a child is born and diagnosed, the parents are essentially told, no, you don't go there, you go over here. This is your life. This is the road for you. So if we look very, very quickly at the lives of people with and without disabilities across a lifespan, think about a 2-year-old. A 2-year-old who does not have a disability, okay, a 2-year-old without a disability, he's 2, and maybe a stay-at-home mom or dad, one of them hasn't gone back to work yet. So you think, what are they doing? Who are they with? Again, think in terms of relationships and experiences. Who are they with? What are they doing? How are they spending their time? Well, the kid's being terrible too, right? You know, stay-at-home mom or dad, you know, mom's still trying to get him to take 2 naps a day. Any moms remember that? I mean, when my kids, like, they get and had 2 naps at first, right? They're going to give them the morning nap. It's like, no, I need you to take 2 naps a day, right? You might not need it, but I need you to take 2 naps a day. And he's being terrible too, throwing stuff in the toilet bowl, throwing stuff, you know, throwing timber tantrums. He's living a real life in the real world. Contrast that with the vast majority of 2-year-olds with developmental disabilities. What are they doing? Who are they with? How are they spending their time? One mom said it this way: therapy, therapy, therapy. The child's spending most of his time with strangers. Now, they become not strangers, but they're not family members, they're not caregivers. The child's spending most of his time doing that kind of stuff. Now we jump up and make him a 4-year-old. 4-year-old who does not have a disability. Parents have both come back to work now. Where is that child? What's he doing? Who's he with? How's he spending his time? He's in a preschool or child care. He's getting to know the kids he's going to go to kindergarten with. He's getting invited to birthday parties. That's what 4-year-olds do. That's really, really important to kids. Then you think about a child with a disability, a 4-year-old child with a disability. Probably in a special ed preschool, segregated with other kids with disabilities. What other group of young children would we say it's okay to segregate them based on the characteristic? If we said, let's have a preschool for black kids, we'd say, that's not okay. Let's have a preschool for children of undocumented workers. We'd say, that's not okay. But somehow we said it's okay to segregate young children with disabilities with other kids with disabilities. So, you think about that 4-year-old child with a disability, and I've been doing this now for 28 years or so. The number of parents I've met from coast to coast, and I go to Canada sometimes, parents of 4-year-olds, or parents of 8-year-olds, or parents of 30-year-olds, who have said to me oftentimes with tears rolling down their face, Kathy, my child with a disability was never invited to a birthday party. What do you have to have kids come to your birthday party? What do you have to have first? Friends. That's what I'm talking about. We have got to do better. The children with disabilities grow up without friends. They grow up isolated. And then when they're adults, they're too often isolated. And so that's what I mean about those precious but ordinary relationships and experiences that other people take for granted. So that 4-year-old child with disability is probably in a special preschool, probably still doing therapy, so he's not living a real life. And of course, neither is his family, because it infects the whole family. Now let's make it a girl this time. 18-year-old girl without a disability. What's she doing? Who's she with? How's she spending her time? Well, we don't want to know. Some of us have been 18-year-old girls, and some have dated 18-year-old girls. We just hope she's going to live to be 19, right? But she's getting ready to graduate high school. Her parents are taking her on college tours. They're researching on the internet. And the world is open before her, and anything and everything is possible. And that's how it should be for all young people. But contrast that with the vast majority, 18, 19, 20-year-olds with developmental disabilities. What are they doing? Where are they with? How are they spending their time? Probably still therapy. They're probably in a life skills class at a high school. And of course, a life skills education is not going to get you a job. It's not going to get you into post-secondary education. It's just going to prepare you to stay in more segregated settings. And so that's the path. Instead of that young person's world getting larger, like it is for children without disabilities, their world starts to get smaller. And then we look at adults with disabilities. And I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but those 25-year-olds, let's say 25, 30-year-olds, who don't have disabilities, they've left home, they're working, they're going to college, going back to college, have some kids, get a divorce, move back home. Their parents are up and raise their kids. They're going to go back to college again, but I mean, that's real life today. Contrast that with the vast majority of adults with developmental disabilities, and we have a 75 to 90% unemployment rate. And again, I'm preaching to the choir. You all know this. That number is significantly higher for people with more significant disabilities. So I presented, for example, you all know about People First groups. I presented at People First conferences, and there'll be 200 adults with disabilities in the room, and I'll say, how many of you have a real job? And some of the times, nobody raises their hand. Okay, and we're not just talking, and you all know, we're not just talking about people who don't have a job. We're talking about people who are living below the poverty line. And in this, the richest country in the world, that is shameful. That's one of the reasons the principal of my kid's school decided to make it inclusive school, because he started looking at statistics. I mean, just way before I met him. He was already there. That he said, gee, we take kids at age 3, we put them in a special ed preschool, and we keep them until they're 22. I mean, if parents want the kid to keep receiving services till they're 22. He said, 19 years of public education? And then these young people cannot enter the workforce? He said, there's something wrong. And it is shameful to me, in this richest country in the world, that we're making progress in so many other areas of different groups that have been marginalized and devalued. And people with disabilities are still over here. I'm working on a news article right now. Some of you know, I don't want to get too political, but in the last 6 months, a lot of changes to, healthcare stuff and, cuts to Medicaid. And you see all these adults with disabilities in the halls of Congress. Maybe you see that on TV, and they're in their wheelchairs, and the cops are dragging them out to pull them out of their wheelchairs and arresting them. Okay, so let's have that image in your head. Now I want you to think about gun safety or LGBTQ issues or women's issues. All those other groups have all kinds of other allies with them. Okay? Then go back and look at the stuff in Congress, in the halls of Congress, hearings where there's just people with disabilities. No allies. Why? Because people with disabilities are still isolated. They're not working. They're not working in real jobs where their co-workers are going to come out and say, yeah, I'm going to go join you in that march on the White House or on the Capitol. So we're still isolated. We haven't made the same progress because there's still so much isolation and segregation, both social and physical, that we don't have the allies that other groups have that are starting to make these changes. And so I like this quote from Thomas Szasz. He's a psychiatrist. He just died a couple of years ago. And he was very anti-traditional psychiatry. He was like a rebel in his field. And he said, whether a person with a disability can be gainfully employed or work as an independent producer depends less on his medical condition than on his educational level, motivation for work, and the personal, economic, and political opportunities open to him. So he's saying in a much fancier way what I said earlier, that it's not about the person's disability. It's not about the person's medical diagnosis. It's about their educational level, motivation for work, personal, economic, and political opportunities open to him. So again, it's not about the person's diagnosis. It's about what continues to keep happening in our society. So I'm going to shift gears and really, really quickly tell you how I got from here to there, because I haven't always been the way I am today. So what our journey was, that Benjamin was born prematurely, right, all that jazz. He was in the NICU, he's a little tiny baby. The picture on the bottom right, he was still supposed to be in here, right, and he's not in here anymore, he's over here. And So he was diagnosed with cerebral palsy at the age of 4 months. Later he got a low vision diagnosis and some learning disabilities diagnoses. And, but they said, oh, he's going to need early intervention, he's going to need physical therapy, occupational therapy, then later speech therapy. And so, boy, I got on it. And the doctor started off with 2 times a week of therapy. I said, wait a minute, if 2 times a week was good, then what? More is better. So I became Therapy Mom of the Year. Probably some of you in here could raise your hands. Okay? I had the banner, I had the crown, the tiara, the roses. I'm Therapy Mom of the Year. And all the, so we're doing therapy 7 days a week. I'm taking them to the clinic, the therapists are coming to our home, and I'm doing the whole program. So I turned my living room into a little therapy clinic. I got the big orange therapy ball. We're going broke, but some of you relate to that. We got a hot tub. We're going to do water therapy right there in the backyard. We don't have to take the therapy. Again, we're going broke. Our credit, I'm a stay-at-home mom, and my husband worked real hard because I'm going to buy all this stuff for Benjamin. And all the professionals said, Kathy, you are such a great mom. Oh, we wish we had more parents like you. Right? But I hated our lives. I just hated our lives. And some people say, well, yeah, that's because you have a child with a disability. No, what I realized was that the day after Benjamin was diagnosed, he was no different than he was the day before. He did not change. He didn't catch cerebral palsy on the way to the doctor's office that day. He was still the same kid. Who changed? He didn't change. Who changed? I did. Okay? So if you're a parent, go and look in the mirror. Your kid didn't change. You changed. So I started treating Benjamin like a child with a disability. I started treating him as a child with cerebral palsy. And that's what he became. And so I had allowed services to take over our lives. When I said that I hated our lives, that's what I hated about it. That everything revolved around Benjamin's what he could not do. And so it affected his sister's life, who was 2 years older. It affected Mark's life. It affected my life. Of course, it affected Benjamin's life. It affected our whole family. So that one time we were going to take, we'd saved up money to take a trip to Disney World. Kids were little. And I warned the therapist, okay, another month from now, we're going to be gone for 2 weeks. What? You can't be gone for 2 weeks. I said, well, yeah, we're going on vacation. Oh, Kathy, we've got a waiting list for services. If Benjamin's going to be away from it, he doesn't need therapy for 2 weeks, you could lose your slot. You got to go back and get on the waiting list. And I said, we are going to Disney World. And if we lose our slot, then we'll get back in line if we have to. But we are going to Disney World. And you think about how all the, and see, like, do therapists, do doctors, do providers, do they ever think about the person as a whole? Or the family as a whole? Because see, everything just gets focused on, again, the diagnosis and what people cannot do. So, I didn't know what to do at the time, because people don't give me any other options. Today in the work I do in my presentations, my website, my articles, I help parents today learn you don't have to keep going down that path, you can go down a different path. But by now, Benjamin's 3, and I got into this leadership development training program that I told you about. And I thought I could learn something from these adults that are in my class. Because I'm just a parent of a 3-year-old, and here's a 35-year-old with cerebral palsy, and here's a 40-year-old with autism, and here's a 38-year-old Down syndrome. And so this is going to make some of you uncomfortable. I know that it did because it made me uncomfortable. But I realized that we usually only change when we're made to feel uncomfortable. Whenever we're scared, angry, frustrated, irritated, as long as we keep doing the status quo and nothing upsets us, then we keep doing the same old thing, right? Albert Einstein's definition of insanity, right? Doing the same things over and over again, expecting a different result, okay? And so I got to know these adults, and I said, well, what was your life like when you were little? And they telling me what it was like to be taken to therapy all your life. And the message to the child is, you're not okay. You're not okay the way you are. And we're going to keep taking you to therapy until we say that you're okay by our standards. And of course, they never reached that standard, okay? And then I said, well, what about when you were in school? Well, Kathy, I didn't go to the same kind of school as my brother and sister. I was put on the special ed bus. Some of them were told they didn't even go to school. Special ed law had not even been passed yet. Others were on the special ed bus. They said I was taken to a different school. The message of segregation to the child is, you're still not okay. We're not going to let you belong. I said, well, now you're an adult. What's your life like? Well, I'm getting adult services. They're still writing goals for me. And, they've been writing goals for Benjamin for 3 years. Here's a 40-year-old saying, they're still writing goals for me. And it's like, with friends like this, who needs enemy? He said, and again, these stories are universal almost. They say, Kathy, they've been writing goals for me all my life. And these are people that are supposed to be on my team. Parents, therapists, family members, providers, whatever, and teachers when I was in school. And they would say to me, Kathy, when people write goals for me, and of course that's what the law says. We have to write goals, so there's accountability because we're using taxpayer dollars, right? They said, but Kathy, when they write goals for me, what they're saying to me is, we don't want you to be the way you are. We want you to be this way. And they'd say, Kathy, I wish people would love me and accept me and stop trying to change me. Well, this was, again, as a parent of a 3-year-old, I was like, wow, this is really powerful stuff here. Again, I'm not quite sure what to do with this information because I'm hearing other things from all the professionals, right? Oh no, Benjamin needs all this, he's so far behind, he's on the developmental scale, he's like 0, my daughter's like 110, and Benjamin's like, he can't sit up, he can't talk, he wasn't walking, he wasn't crawling, all that kind of stuff. I have my Google keywords set to a few keywords that I come across articles that you don't normally see, in the newspaper every day. And one of them was an interview, this was from a couple of years ago. It's an interview with a woman, her name was Dr. Margaret Steinman. And she, at the time of the interview, worked for she wrote Medicare policy. She was a medical doctor. She was also an artist and an author and some other stuff. And as a child, though, she was diagnosed with a condition that she had all these quote-unquote bone deformities. So as a child, she had surgery after surgery and therapy after therapy, all of her life growing up. And in this interview, they asked her about her childhood. And this is what she said. I felt as a child they kept trying to fix me, but nobody was helping me learn how to live it the way I was. And that's the same message that these adults have been telling me. People keep trying to fix me instead of helping me learn to live with the way I am. So, again, universal stories almost. Are they true for 100% of people with disabilities? Probably not. But the majority that I've met over 28 years, the majority is. And so, other thing I realized when I was in that class was that every single child is born included. Inclusion is the natural state of being. Inclusion is the default position. People do not become excluded or segregated just because they have a disability. It takes effort on our part. So we, when the child is little, we call a meeting, right? Have a team meeting, right? Some of you remember the IP meetings, back in the day? Have those IP meetings. And then we decide collectively, we as parents don't have an equal voice, we know that, but collectively, the people on the team decide to take the person out of their natural environment of being included and to put them in a self-contained classroom or to ship them off to another school. And so it takes effort on our part to make that happen. So segregation doesn't happen just in a vacuum. Well, I realized my daughter Emily would always be included, and I wanted Benjamin to be included. Why shouldn't the same thing happen for my son? So I chose not to send him to special ed preschool, and boy, they wagged their fingers at me about that. Oh, And I said, well, I wouldn't send my daughter there. That became sort of the way Mark and I thought. If it's not okay for Emily, it is not okay for Benjamin. So life goes on. We moved to Colorado, and Ben was included there. We got him in the neighborhood t-ball team. He was the only kid with a disability. They'd never done that before. But they, oh, well, I guess we can do this. Yeah, we can do this. Benjamin can play t-ball sitting in his little wheelchair. He was in Cub Scouts. He was in all these ordinary things. And so by now, he's got one foot living in real life in the real world, because he's included in all this stuff, but he's still got one foot in the disability world because he's still going to therapy 2 days a week after school. And so in first grade, he starts crying in the afternoons going home. And he's saying, Mommy, I don't want to go to therapy. And I'm driving to go. I know, but you got to go. Right? You have a disability. That's your job. Go to therapy. Mommy, I don't want to go to therapy. I know, but you got to go. Finally, after about 6 weeks, he just exploded one day. And he's screaming in the car, and he's crying so hard he can't hardly talk. He says, Mommy, I've been going to therapy all my life. And I thought how sad that a 6-year-old could say they've been doing anything all their lives. And that's how he saw his life. He said, I just want to go back to school like the other kids. He says, going to therapy does not make me feel like a regular person. A regular person. He's telling me the same things those adults have told me. He wanted to be a regular person. And he felt like a regular person at T-ball and at therapy, at T-ball and at church, in Sunday school classes and Cub Scouts, but he didn't feel like a regular person going to therapy. So that was the day that we got out of disability world. Benjamin never went to therapy again. And I don't want you thinking I'm bashing therapists, I'm not. What I realized is we need therapists as consultants. Benjamin had good therapists. I took what they had taught me. Those of you that are parents in here, didn't you learn how to do what the therapist did for your kids? So I said, we're just going to do that naturally. Instead of taking Benjamin to therapy, I'm going to use what they taught me. We're just going to incorporate that in beneficial activities, at home. So when he's watching Jeopardy at night, my husband would say, honey, Benjamin, honey, how about you want a leg massage? So he stretches his hamstrings, okay? But we didn't call it therapy. We just, get an exercise. And Benjamin was okay with that because it was just different from, we're going to do therapy on you, okay? So there are therapists actually who started using my book, and there are many OTs and PTs that are starting to get this and start doing stuff differently. There are a lot of them that recognize the how. It's the how that's the problem of trying to fix somebody. So we need therapists as consultants, teach us as parents, teach preschool teachers, teach classroom teachers how to incorporate beneficial activities throughout the person's day instead of doing therapy once or twice a week. So life got better for us right away. Benjamin and his sister, going to school. Emily graduated. She went to community college. Benjamin went to community college, got his associate's degree. The last semester, he found online classes. He was like any other young person. He wanted to stay up till 3 in the morning and sleep till noon, which you can't do if you have an 8 a.m. class. His last semester, he took online classes, and then he could do it whenever he wanted. He could sleep till noon. And then he wanted to get his bachelor's, so he enrolled online at Arizona State University. So he earned his bachelor's degree. Benjamin does not write with a pencil. He actually does a little presentation called "You Don't Have to Go to College." You don't have to write with a pencil to go to college. If you're up to the kindergarten teacher and the OT, Benjamin would still be in kindergarten, right? Because you got to write your name. And I told the kindergarten teacher, I said, he's not going to grow up to be a calligrapher. So let's move on, okay? And then scissor cutting. Oh, scissor cutting, hugely important kindergarten skill. I said, he's not going to be a tailor. So move on. I mean, Benjamin, he has cerebral, anybody have familiar with somebody with cerebral palsy? Benjamin can squeeze, but he can never release, okay? So I bought those Fisker scissors, right, that have the thing, and they don't make any for children, so I just bought the smallest ones that have little short blades, and I put those in his backpack one day. And the teacher did call me, Kathy, you gotta come up here. You got scissors in his backpack. They're very sharp. They're a weapon. We have zero tolerance for weapons. And I said, he's got CP. I know, Kathy, if somebody else sees these, he might get suspended. And okay, I'll come get him. And I said, look, Benjamin has got little control over his arms. I said, if he stabs anybody, it'll be himself by accident. He'll cut his jugular. Okay, so then I got the scissors that just vibrate, right? So I sent those to school. The classroom teacher said, no, those make too much noise. I said, okay, fine. That's what I said. He's not going to be a tailor. I said, you cut it for him. The kid can cut it. He can tear it with his teeth. I don't care. But move on. Scissor cutting. Forget the scissor cutting. So, I mean, at some point we have to say, what is really important in people's lives? And that stuff's not important, okay? And so, and then he got his master's degree. And he did that online at University of Illinois Springfield. So, and I tell you that story not for you to think that Mark and I are such wonderful parents. We're not. We're not any different than any other parents. We get up every day, we make mistakes. What Mark and I did, though, is we changed our attitudes. And we started focusing on what can Benjamin do, and let's build on that, and not worry about what he can't do, okay? And put assistive technology, supports, and accommodations, which I'm going to talk about that in the breakout session, of what things can we do right now to ensure that children or adults are living the lives they want, or living real lives, and what kind of tools do we need to put in place for that person's life. So Benjamin has got a little part-time job. He is doing some volunteer work while he looks for a full-time job. I just talked to him last night, and he's got an internship starting in May. It's going to run for the summer, and he's going to be going 3 days a week to do that for an internship, but hopefully that's going to turn into something. So we just decided a long time ago, we're not going to let Benjamin's disability control his life. His disability is not the most important thing about it, okay? And the same is true for anybody with a disability. What I realized is that we're very, very good at sort of being mechanics. We're good at working on people's bodies and brains with the best of intentions, but in the process we cause great harm to their hearts and minds. And I think we need to focus on their hearts and minds, that they know that they are valued and loved and they're perfect just the way they are. That's what's going to make them feel good about themselves, instead of getting these messages all the time that they're not okay, they don't belong. If you ever have any chance to go to a website from Alfie Kohn, A-L-F-I-E Kohn, and he talks about what we do doesn't matter nearly as much as how others experience what we do. So again, it's not about what we're doing to people, but how do people, how is my Benjamin, how are your kids, how are other kids and adults with disabilities, how are they experiencing what we do? Every single day we're making memories. And I think back to those adults that I met when my son was very young, and about what their memories were of growing up. And they didn't have the same kind of memories that their brothers and sisters had. Now, having said that, it is never too late. I meet people all the time and they'll say, oh, Kathy, I wish I'd have met you, 30 years ago. Doesn't matter. Right? Tomorrow's a new day. Whatever we've done in the past, we can start doing things differently tomorrow, okay? And good memories then take the place of the memories that weren't so good. It's only whenever we don't ever make any good memories that the bad memories are the thing that define somebody. So every single day we're having new opportunities to make memories. All of us in this room have the best of intentions. Nobody in this room gets up in the morning and says, I'm going to go do bad things today. I'm going to go do my worst today. No, I'm going to go do my best today. The problem is we don't consider the unintended negative consequences. And that's what I realized early on too. That I had the best of intentions of getting my son all that therapy and all those interventions so that we're doing it 7 days a week. I had the best of intentions. What were the unintended consequences? Well, quite frankly, I wrecked my son's childhood. And I take full responsibility. I didn't know any better. And you don't know what you don't know. And once I knew better, and that's true for all, but once you know better, then you do better. I wrecked his sister's childhood. I mean, it affected Emily's childhood too, okay? Luckily, our children are resilient, and they forgive us, and we start doing stuff differently, and then what you did in the past is not so important, okay? So all of us have the best of intentions. So if you take nothing else away from this, you take that. Whatever you want to do with, for, on behalf of a person with a disability, you say to yourself, I have the best of intentions, but what might be the unintended consequences? None of us have a crystal ball, but we can use other people's experiences, we can use historical perspectives, we can use our common sense. For example, if you help a person with a disability too much, what happens? What? They become helpless, right? They learn to be helpless because of what we've done. Again, that's not a unique thing to people with disabilities. Other people can learn that too. But it's learned helplessness, and we're going to talk about that in the breakout. I like this quote from a psychologist from the 1960s, Gottfried Booth. He says, love means that the adult be genuinely concerned with the evolution of the true nature of the child. Children are unable to respond to a love which tries to fashion them according to the concept of an adult, no matter how good the latter's intention may be. So it's kind of, again, what Alfie Kohn said. We are answerable for what we choose to believe. So all of us in this room can get up every day and choose what our beliefs are. Political, religious, moral, whatever. But we are responsible. We ought to be held accountable for what we choose to believe. I mean, our beliefs are not set in stone.